The morning sky over Seoul turned silver as massive ships descended through the clouds like falling stars. Admiral Jamin stood at the command center window, watching the alien vessels position themselves above every major city on Earth. The ships moved with perfect precision, their hulls reflecting sunlight in brilliant flashes. "Sir, they're sending signals on all frequencies," Lieutenant Hyjin called out, her hands moving quickly across the glowing control panel. "Every language, every communication channel we have." Jamin had dreamed of this moment since joining the military 20 years ago, first contact with alien life. But this wasn't how anyone had imagined it would happen. These weren't explorers coming in peace or scientists seeking knowledge. These beings called themselves the Kethrin Dominion, and they had come to Earth with a very specific purpose. "What do they want?" Commander Taeho asked, studying the streams of data flowing across his screen. The answer came directly from the aliens themselves. The main display flickered, and suddenly they were looking at a creature unlike anything in Earth's history. Stood nearly 8 feet tall, with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer slightly. Forearms moved with graceful coordination as it spoke. Its voice was calm, almost gentle, but carried the weight of absolute authority. "Greetings, people of Earth. I am High Administrator Kethfar of the Dominion. We have come to offer you a place in our galactic civilization. You will receive advanced technology, perfect health systems, and lifespans that extend far beyond your current limits. In return, you will accept our guidance in developing your society properly." Dr. So-young, the base's chief scientist who studied alien life, looked up from her instruments with wide eyes. The energy readings from their ships are incredible. Their technology is hundreds of years ahead of ours. One of those vessels could destroy our entire defense network without breaking a sweat. "But they won't," Jamin said quietly, understanding. Beginning to dawn on him, they don't want to destroy us. They want us to agree to this willingly. The alien continued speaking, its forearms gesturing in patterns that seemed almost hypnotic. "This process has been completed successfully on 847 worlds across the galaxy. Each species initially shows resistance, as is natural. But all eventually come to understand that accepting our guidance is the path to true civilization. It will follow this same pattern." Around the world, similar scenes played out in command centers and government buildings. World leaders gathered in emergency meetings, their faces pale as they watched the alien broadcasts. The Kethrin ships hung in the sky like dark clouds, waiting patiently for humanity's response. "They're not threatening us directly," observed Commander Taeho, reviewing the aliens' words. "They're presenting this as a gift, as help. A gift with strings attached," Jamin replied. "They want us to choose to submit to them, to ask for their control." The hours that followed were tense. The Kethrins demonstrated their technology in small ways, healing sick animals with devices that looked like toys, making barren ground bloom with life, solving mathematical problems that Earth's greatest minds couldn't understand. Each demonstration was accompanied by the same message: "This could be yours. You need only accept our guidance." Dr. So-young worked frantically to understand what they were seeing. It's like they've solved every problem that has ever puzzled humanity: disease, aging, energy production, space travel. They have answers for everything. They're offering to share it, Taeho said. "In exchange for what they call guided development," Jamin added, "which means they make our decisions for us." As the days passed, the Kethrins showed no signs of impatience. Their ships remained in position, their broadcasts continued at regular intervals, and their demonstrations of advanced technology became more impressive. They spoke of the hundreds of worlds that had initially resisted, but eventually joined the Dominion happily. "Every species goes through the same stages," High Administrator Kethvar explained during one broadcast. "First shock, then anger, then bargaining, then acceptance, finally gratitude. You will experience all of these emotions, and then you will understand that we offer only what is best for you." The Kethrins began setting up orbital stations around Earth, massive structures that appeared overnight. They called them cultural exchange centers and invited Earth's leaders to visit. The first diplomatic missions returned with reports of technologies beyond human imagination and aliens who seemed genuinely convinced they were helping humanity evolve. "They truly believe they're doing us a favor," reported one ambassador. "They see us as children who need guidance to grow up properly." Within weeks, the first educational exchange programs began. Young people from around the world were invited to visit the orbital stations to learn about galactic civilization. Adults were offered seminars on proper development and mature thinking. The Kethrons moved with calm efficiency, setting up their integration process with the same methodical approach they had used on hundreds of other worlds. But as Admiral Jamin watched the alien ships hanging in Earth's sky, he wondered if the Kethrons had ever encountered a species quite like humanity. Something told him that their 847 successful integrations might not have prepared them for what they would find on Earth. The Dominion had come to teach humanity submission. They had no idea that humans might have very different ideas about what they were willing to learn. The metal doors of the transport shuttle hissed open, and Dong-Su stepped onto Learning Platform 7 for the first time. The orbital station stretched out before him like a city made of light and crystal. 50 other teenagers from across Asia walked beside him, their faces showing the same mix of fear and curiosity that he felt. "Welcome to your advancement," said the tall blue figure waiting for them. The Kethran instructor had 4 arms and skin that seemed to glow softly in the station's artificial light. Its real name was a series of sounds that human throats couldn't make, so the students had started calling it Teacher Blue. "You are here to learn the truth about civilization," Teacher Blue continued, its voice calm and patient. "You will understand why fighting against the natural order brings only pain and suffering. Those who accept guidance find peace." Dong-Su looked around at his fellow students. There was Jiwoo from Tokyo, Hannah from Seoul, and dozens of others. From cities across Asia, they had all been chosen for their intelligence and leadership potential. The Kethrons wanted to educate the best and brightest, believing they would return to Earth and convince others to accept Dominion rule. The first weeks of classes were unlike anything Dong-Su had experienced. The Kethrons taught history lessons that spanned entire galaxies. They showed holographic displays of hundreds of worlds, each one populated by species that had once resisted the Dominion but eventually joined willingly. "The Zalani fought us for 50 years, Teacher Blue explained, showing images of a world covered in crystal cities. "They destroyed our first diplomatic missions and declared eternal war. Now look at them. They are grateful for our guidance and live in perfect harmony." The psychology classes were more unsettling. The Kethrons explained that emotions like anger, pride, and stubbornness were evolutionary mistakes that prevented species from growing. They showed brain scans of various aliens, pointing out how primitive emotional centers had been reduced through proper education. "Your species is particularly afflicted with these outdated responses," Teacher Blue said during one lecture. "But this can be corrected. You will learn to think more clearly when you are no longer clouded by useless feelings." But Dong-Su found himself paying attention to more than just the lessons. He watched how Teacher Blue operated the holographic systems, how it accessed the station's computer networks, how it communicated with other Kethrons. Every gesture, every piece of technology was information he stored away in his memory. During technology demonstrations, the Kethrons showed the students their advanced weapons and defensive systems. They wanted to prove that resistance was hopeless. That human technology was like throwing rocks at a mountain. "Your primitive missiles cannot penetrate our shields," Teacher Blue demonstrated, showing videos of Earth's most advanced weapons harmlessly bouncing off Kethron barriers. "Your computers are toys compared to our systems. This is why you need our guidance to advance properly." What the Kethrons didn't realize was that Dong-Su and his classmates were learning exactly how those shields worked, how the computers operated, and where the weak points might be. They nodded and asked respectful questions, but their minds were working in ways their teachers never expected. Back on Earth, Myung sat in a converted stadium with 5,000 other adults, listening to a mandatory education seminar. The Kethron speaker was different from the ones teaching the young people, but the message was the same. "Submission is not defeat," the alien explained, its 4 arms moving in graceful patterns as it spoke. "It is growing up your species holds onto ideas of independence because you have not yet evolved beyond them. Children want to make their own choices, but wise adults accept guidance from those who know better. The massive screens around the stadium showed images of beautiful worlds. Throughout the Dominion, cities that floated in the clouds, oceans that glowed with bioluminescent life, beings of different species working together in perfect harmony. It was paradise, the Kethrans said, and all humanity had to do was accept their place in it, my young. Nodded along with the crowd, but her eyes were studying the Kethran speaker's equipment. She memorized the design of the translator device clipped to its chest, the way the personal shield generator hummed when it moved, and how it interfaced with the stadium systems to control the displays. Every detail was important information. Seminars continued for weeks. The Kethrans were patient teachers, never showing anger or frustration when humans asked difficult questions. They genuinely believed they were helping humanity evolve beyond its primitive nature. Your ancestors lived in caves and fought with sticks, the speaker explained during one session. Now you build cities and fly through space, says evolution. The next step is learning to accept guidance from those who are more advanced than you. Up on the orbital station, Dong-Su and his fellow students were excelling at their lessons. They learned the Kethran language quickly, mastered the basic principles of their technology, and even began to understand their philosophy. Their teachers were pleased with their progress. You were learning faster than most species, Teacher Blue told them with something that might have been pride. Perhaps humans have more potential than we initially calculated. But late at night, when the Kethrans thought the students were sleeping, small groups would gather in hidden corners of the station. They would share what they had learned, but not in the way their teachers expected. Instead of discussing how to accept submission, they talked about weaknesses they had noticed, systems they had figured out, and possibilities their teachers had never considered. The Kethrans had made a crucial mistake. They assumed that learning their systems meant accepting their authority. They never imagined that humans might learn how to think like Kethrans for entirely different reasons. The alarm system screamed through the Kethran command ship as red lights flashed across every control panel. Commander Velkarn stood frozen in the center of the bridge, staring at reports that made no sense. 15 orbital platforms had stopped responding. Not damaged, not destroyed, simply gone dark, as if they had never existed. "Explain this to me," Velkarn said. His forearms crossed in a gesture that showed both confusion and growing anger. "How can primitive humans penetrate our defenses? Their weapons are centuries behind ours." The security chief, a younger Kethran named Zethman, trembled as he delivered his report. "Commander, they didn't use their weapons. They used ours. Every access code, every system override, every security protocol, they knew all of it." Deep inside Learning Platform 7, Dong-Su worked quickly at a Kethran control console. The alien symbols on the screen might as well have been his native language after 2 years of intensive study. His fingers moved across the interface with the confidence of someone who had spent countless hours learning these systems. "Security grid is down," he whispered into the small communicator hidden in his collar. "Defensive shields are offline. We have maybe 10 minutes before they figure out what's happening." Around him, his former classmates moved like shadows through the station corridors. Giwu had disabled the internal sensors. Hana was downloading everything from the main computer banks. Minho was setting charges that would destroy the station's critical systems without killing anyone. They had learned Kethran weaknesses, not cruelty. "Remember what Teacher Blue always said," Dong-Su spoke quietly to his team. "The Kethrans believe that superior beings naturally dominate inferior ones. They can't imagine that we learn their systems for any reason except to submit to them." Years earlier, these same students had sat in Kethran classrooms, nodding politely as their teachers explained why resistance was futile. They had learned the alien language, studied their technology, and absorbed their philosophy. But while the Kethrans thought they were creating obedient subjects, they had actually been training the perfect infiltrators. On Earth's surface, Mi-young coordinated the ground operations from a hidden command center built in the mountains outside Seoul. The room buzzed with activity as dozens of humans worked at control stations that looked remarkably similar to Kethran technology. They had learned to build them during the mandatory education seminars. Team 7 reports Platform 12 is secure. called out Jae-sung from his position at the communications array. Team 3 is moving on the processing center in Tokyo.
Young.
Smiled grimly as she watched the tactical display. Every red dot represented a Kethran installation that had been captured or disabled. The aliens had spent 2 years teaching humans how their technology worked, how their command structure operated, and how their psychology functioned. They had given away every secret they possessed, believing that knowledge would lead to submission. The beauty of it, Mi-young said to her second-in-command, is that they taught us everything willingly. Every demonstration of their superior technology showed us exactly how to defeat it. Every lecture about our primitive nature revealed their own weaknesses. The Kethrans had made a fundamental error in understanding human nature. They assumed that learning meant accepting, that knowledge led to obedience. They had never encountered a species that would study their master's systems. In order to overthrow them, back on the command ship, Velkarn stared at the growing list of failures. Station after station was going dark, not from external attack, but from internal sabotage. The humans were using Kethran shuttles to move between installations, Kethran weapons to disable defenses, and Kethran codes to access restricted areas. In 847 previous integrations, this has never happened, Velkarn said, his voice barely above a whisper. Every other species eventually accepted our guidance. The pattern's always the same. Resistance, then negotiation, then acceptance. Humans are different, Zethman replied. They learned our systems, but they didn't learn our values. They took our knowledge and used it against us. The truth was even more disturbing than Velkarn realized. The humans hadn't just learned Kethran technology, they had learned to think like Kethrans. They understood the aliens' rigid hierarchical mindset, their belief in natural superiority, and their inability to imagine that advanced knowledge could be used for rebellion rather than submission. On Platform 7, Dong-Su made his final adjustments to the station's control systems. In a few minutes, the platform would be completely under human control. Its databases copied, and its defenses turned against other Kethran installations. They were such good teachers, he said into his communicator as he prepared to leave. Showed us exactly how their empire works, how their technology functions, and how their minds operate. They just never expected us to use that education to tear their system apart. The evacuation was swift and efficient. The humans disappeared into captured Kethran shuttles, leaving behind stations that would no longer serve the Dominion. Shuttle pulled away from Platform 7. You could see other orbital installations going dark across the night sky. The Kethrans had come to Earth expecting to add another compliant species to their empire. Instead, they had created the one thing they had never encountered in 8 centuries of conquest, students who had learned their lessons too well. Captain Yuajin sat in the darkness of her hidden command center, her fingers dancing across a control panel that glowed with soft blue light. The device looked like standard Kethran communication equipment, but she had modified it in ways that would have shocked its original creators. Every few minutes, she sent another package of information shooting across the galaxy hidden inside the Dominion's own data streams. Message to Zalani Prime is away, she reported to her team. Technical specifications for shield disruption, command codes for orbital platforms, and psychological profiles of their administrators. Everything we've learned about beating them. The beauty of her system was its simplicity. The Kethrans had built their communication network to be efficient and secure, but they had never imagined that conquered species would use it to organize rebellion. Hyojin had learned their data protocols during her education sessions, and now she was turning their own network against them, thousands of light years away. On a world called Zalani Prime, a being named Kethlora received the hidden message. The Zalani looked like tall, graceful birds with silver feathers and large, intelligent eyes. They had been under Kethran control for 300 years, their once proud civilization reduced to mining colonies and agricultural centers. Kethlora had been born into submission. Her grandparents had fought the Kethrans when they first arrived, but that was ancient history. The Zalani had learned to accept their place in the Dominion, to be grateful for the order and stability it provided. They had forgotten what it felt like to be free. But as Kethlora read the message from Earth, something stirred in her chest that she had never felt before. The humans had done the impossible. They'd learned Kethran systems and used them to fight back. They had proven that rebellion was possible. The shield generators have a weakness at the third harmonic frequency, she read aloud to her fellow. Workers in the crystal mines. Command codes can be overridden using these sequences. The administrators always respond to challenges with the same rigid patterns. The information spread through the Zilani population like wildfire. Workers in the mines shared it with farmers in the agricultural zones. Parents whispered it to their children. Within days, the entire world was buzzing with secrets that the Kethrans had never meant them to learn. On Earth, engineer Sung Ho monitored the rebellion's growth from his base hidden deep in the Korean mountains. Had built from salvaged Kethran components, crackled with reports from across the galaxy. Each message brought news of another world waking up from centuries of sleep. The Vorth mining system has gone dark, he reported to his team, his voice filled with excitement. The Kethran administrators are requesting emergency support. They're losing control of 17 worlds at the same time. Dr. Youngmi, who had once worked at the Seoul Institute before the invasion, now served as the rebellion's chief strategist. She studied the incoming reports with the mind of someone who had learned to think like both human and Kethran. They're responding exactly as we predicted, she said, pointing to the tactical display. More ships, more administrators, more educational programs. They can't imagine any solution except applying more control. The Kethran response was, indeed, predictable. When the Zilani began disrupting mining operations, the Dominion sent additional overseers. When the Vorth colonies stopped responding to commands, they dispatched more communication specialists. When multiple worlds showed signs of unrest, it increased the frequency of mandatory education sessions, but each new Kethran presence only gave the rebels more opportunities to learn. Every ship that arrived carried technology that could be studied and copied. Every administrator brought new insights into Kethran psychology and command structure. Every educational program revealed additional weaknesses in their systems. Young Dong-Su, now a seasoned resistance leader, coordinated strikes against Kethran installations across the Pacific region. His team had grown from a handful of students to a network of thousands, all connected by the knowledge they had gained from their former teachers. They're sending reinforcements to the Tokyo orbital platform, he reported during a strategy meeting. 3 ships, standard configuration. We know their shield frequencies, their communication codes, and their standard operating procedures. The rebellion had evolved beyond anything the Kethrans could understand. Instead of large armies fighting pitched battles, the humans had created small, independent cells that worked together but could never be eliminated by a single strike. They had learned from the Kethran's own methods and improved upon them. Myung, who had once sat through mandatory education seminars, now ran a network of safe houses and supply lines that stretched across continents. The knowledge she had gained from watching Kethran equipment demonstrations had become the foundation for an entire underground economy. The beauty of their system, she explained to new recruits, is that it's designed to prevent rebellion by making it seem impossible. They never built defenses against people who understood their technology as well as they did. The speed of the rebellion spread surprised even its organizers. What had started as a desperate gamble by a few educated humans had become a galaxy-wide revolution. Species that had been docile for centuries were suddenly remembering what it felt like to make their own choices. As Hyojin prepared to send another batch of messages across the galaxy, she reflected on what they had accomplished. The Kethrans had tried to teach submission, but they had accidentally created the most effective revolution in galactic history. The empire that had stood for millennia was crumbling. It was falling because its own educational system had worked too well. The Great Assembly Hall in New Geneva buzzed with voices speaking dozens of different languages. Former Commander Velkarn stood near the back of the room, feeling strange without the blue and silver uniform he had worn for most of his adult life. His forearms hung awkwardly at his sides as he watched beings from across the galaxy debate the future of their new alliance. The Mutual Cooperation Accords will be the foundation of our new civilization, announced Chairman Duhayan from the speaker's platform. The former Soul Resistance leader now served as the rotating president of the Galactic Assembly, a position that changed hands every year between different species. No world shall rule over another. All beings participate. as equals, Velkarn struggled to understand the concept. For thousands of years, his people had believed that advanced species naturally guided less developed ones. It was the way the universe worked, like gravity or the movement of stars. The strong lead, the weak followed, and everyone benefited from the order this created. But now he was learning that this natural law was simply what his people had chosen to believe. The humans had proven that cooperation could be more powerful than domination, that learning from each other was stronger than forcing others to submit. Across the room, he spotted Dr. Sunmi, a human woman who had once sat through mandatory Kethran education seminars. Now she directed the Cultural Exchange Institute, a place where beings from different worlds came to learn from each other without anyone claiming superiority. The Kethrans taught us that submission was natural evolution, Sunmi was explaining, to a group of young students from various species. But they were wrong. True evolution comes from cooperation, from learning from each other without anyone being forced to obey. The students listened with interest. There were humans, Kethrans, Zelani, and others whose names Velkarn was still learning. They sat together as equals, asking questions and sharing ideas, without anyone claiming to be the teacher and others being forced to be students. The transformation of the galaxy had happened faster than anyone expected. When the Kethran Dominion fell, it didn't collapse into chaos as many had feared. Instead, the former subject worlds began working together, sharing technology and knowledge freely. Without the rigid hierarchy that had controlled everything for millennia, creativity and innovation exploded across hundreds of worlds. The Zelani, who had been mining crystal for the Dominion for 3 centuries, discovered they had a natural talent for energy manipulation. They began developing new forms of clean power that could benefit everyone. The Vorth, who had been forced to farm standard crops, started experimenting with new forms of agriculture that could feed entire star systems. Even the Kethrans found new purpose. Many of their former administrators became teachers and advisors. Using their knowledge to help other species develop their own technologies, they had to learn to offer guidance without demanding obedience, to share knowledge without expecting submission in return. On Earth, Captain Dong-Su prepared for another diplomatic mission. The young man who had once been a student on learning. Platform 7 now served as one of humanity's representatives to the Galactic Assembly. His ship, built using a combination of human engineering and Kethran technology, hummed with quiet power as it prepared for launch. Destination confirmed, reported his communications officer, a Zelani named Kethlora, who had once worked in the crystal mines. The Outer Rim colonies are ready to sign the cooperation agreements. Dong-Su smiled as he settled into the captain's chair. The irony of his situation wasn't lost on him. The Kethrans had tried to teach humanity its place in the galaxy as obedient subjects who would accept guidance from their superiors. Instead, humanity had taught the galaxy something completely different, that no one deserved to have their place chosen for them by others. The ship lifted off from Earth's surface, passing through the atmosphere where Kethran vessels had once hung like dark clouds. Now the orbital space around Earth was busy with traffic from dozens of worlds, trade ships, diplomatic vessels, and exploration craft heading out to discover new possibilities. As they traveled through hyperspace, Dong-Su reflected on the lesson that had changed everything. The Kethrans had been excellent teachers, sharing their knowledge with enthusiasm and patience. They had just never expected their students to learn something completely different from what they were trying to teach. The galaxy was vast and full of possibilities that had been suppressed for thousands of years under Kethran rule. Art forms that had been forbidden began to flourish. Scientific discoveries that had been controlled by the Dominion were now shared freely. Philosophies that had been discouraged were explored with new enthusiasm. Most importantly, beings from different worlds were learning to see each other as equals, rather than as rulers and subjects. The Kethrans' greatest mistake had been assuming that intelligence and advancement naturally led to the desire to dominate others. They had never imagined that truly advanced beings might choose cooperation over control. As his ship approached its destination, Dong-Su looked out at the stars and felt a sense of wonder that the Kethrans had never experienced. For the first time in millennia, the galaxy was free to explore its own potential. Every world could choose its own path, make its own discoveries, and contribute to a civilization based on mutual respect rather than forced submission. The Kethrons had come to Earth to add another species to their empire. Instead, they had accidentally created the foundation for something far greater, a galaxy, where every being could learn and grow without anyone telling them what they were supposed to become.